Denver just unanimously voted to halt new AI data center construction for a year. Skagit County in Washington State passed a 6-month moratorium. Seattle is considering a full ban. More than 20 proposed facilities were canceled in just the first quarter of 2026. That's over $40 billion in infrastructure investments that didn't go into those communities. A March 2026 Gallup poll found that 7 in 10 Americans would oppose a data center being built near them. That's a higher opposition rate than nuclear power plants. The easy explanation is that tech companies are failing at communications. They don't share their benefits clearly. They don't align stakeholders before moving forward. The explanation is a little more complex than that. Or rather, it's symptoms for the disease. 3 distinct and compounding forces are driving the data center backlash. Each one requires a different response, and there's something in all 3 that applies to every leader deploying any kind of innovation, not just AI infrastructure and not just in communities. The first force, it's AI anxiety finally found a physical address. So in a 2026 Fox News poll, it found that 67% of Americans harbored general concerns about AI in general. A Mercer survey of 12,000 workers found that 40% now fear losing their job to the technology, and that's up from 28% just a couple years ago. It's hard to block an algorithm or a news cycle, but people can block a building. Data centers have become the most tangible target for a diffuse set of fears about artificial intelligence, whether it's job displacement, surveillance, privacy erosion, or just technology advancing faster than democracy can keep up. There's a second force. The economic costs are real and quantifiable. Data centers require massive electrical grid upgrades. Those costs don't disappear. They get distributed across every ratepayer in the service area over time. They're not just borne by the data center. So a Harvard study confirmed in 2025 that when large-scale electricity consumers enter a constrained grid, like a data center, price pressure spreads to every household. So in DeKalb County in Georgia, a commissioner warned residents that unchecked data center expansion could raise residential power bills by an average of $20 a month. The asymmetry is hard to ignore. So you've got Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Meta collectively spending over $200 billion in capital expenditures in 2024 alone. And that was a 62% year-over-year increase, and it's just continuing. AI electricity consumption from data centers grew 50% in 2025. The communities hosting those facilities are often paying higher utility bills. And that's to subsidize grid upgrades that primarily benefit those corporations and their operations. So when innovation creates real costs for real people who don't share in those gains, resistance should be expected. There's a third force, environmental and resource costs, which are measurable and verifiable. So US data centers consumed approximately 17 billion gallons of water in 2023. And then by 2028, that figure is projected to reach between 38 and 73 billion gallons as well, according to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. So a single Meta facility in Newton County, Georgia, for example, consumes about 500,000 gallons of water per day, roughly 10% of the entire county's supply. Skagit County in Washington acted because commissioners were explicit about it. Water going to data center cooling is water not available for farming. And Skagit County is one of the last fully functional agricultural economies in that Puget Sound region of Washington. Now, here's what makes this more than a local politics story. These 3 forces multiply on each other. AI anxiety creates a predisposed audience ready to believe the worst about economic and environmental claims. And in this case, there's some truth to those. Real economic harm gives financial legitimacy to what might otherwise be dismissed as cultural resistance. Measurable resource depletion also hands opponents a concrete, verifiable argument that converts skeptics into activists. A community that might have tolerated higher electricity bills becomes pretty resistant once it learns its water table is also at risk. A resident who had vague AI concerns becomes an organizer once he or she sees her power bill climbing. That compounding dynamic is why opposition's growing faster than projects are being approved, because these forces are distinct. They need distinct responses in return, though. So first, address the anxiety directly with practical approaches. AI fear is best addressed by giving communities real input into making decisions, creating enforceable operating standards, and public dashboards that track actual impact over time. Brookings researchers have proposed community benefit agreements with measurable, auditable commitments in a practical framework, for example. Those things don't exist today. Second, redesign the economics. If communities are being charged for grid upgrades and bearing the cost of that, the companies driving that demand could potentially fund those upgrades directly. Several hyperscalers are beginning to shift from passive electricity consumers to active grid investors, and they're co-funding infrastructure. That's a very different model from promising jobs and tax revenue while households are absorbing visible rate increases. Third, demonstrate the footprint with operational specifics. So water reclamation commitments, renewable sourcing agreements, efficiency standards tied to specific facilities. Communities are increasingly capable of pulling utility and environmental filings and data and checking the numbers themselves. So track the footprint and define ways to keep it the same size that it is today at a minimum, or figure out ways to create reclamation and sustainability. Now, here's why this matters for every leader, not just those building data centers. The data center backlash is a concentrated, visible version of the dynamic playing out more quietly inside of organizations every day. AI deployed in the workplace without addressing employees' legitimate fears about displacement, or automation introduced without looking at how workers share in productivity gains. In organizational settings, resistance looks like disengagement, could look like slow adoption, turnover, and project plans that just stall out. The mechanism's the same, though. People are bearing the cost of someone else's innovation without sharing in its benefits. So what you can do this week, pick one AI initiative your organization is currently deploying or planning. Map out 3 groups: who captures the primary benefit, who absorbs the primary cost, and who has control over how it gets implemented. If the same people keep appearing in the first column and different people in the second, you may have a disconnect to address before things stall. The communities blocking data centers are asking a question every leader should be asking first: who pays for this? And is the arrangement fair? That's the reframe, so you can leapfrog the headlines, your leadership, and your business. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and find me at sorenkaplan.com.